it didn't scream state capitol as much as it will now. What we're doing now, I think, is just it's going to blow people's minds. I think people that were used to it before, and now they're going to see it, and I think it's going to be night and day.
Welcome back to the Searchlight Report, a podcast from South Dakota Searchlight that brings you up to date on policy and politics in the Mount Rushmore state. I'm your host, Megan O'Brien. For this week's episode, I climbed to the highest point inside the South Dakota State Capitol's Rotunda Dome to learn more about what goes into restoring parts of a building that's more than 100 years old. The last time it went through a full restoration was in 1989 to celebrate South Dakota's 100 years of statehood. Lately, it's begun to show its age again. Lawmakers have provided $13 million in the last several years to study problems afflicting the Capitol, along with its lake and its grounds, and to make partial repairs while planning for a larger project. Guesses about the cost of a full restoration are $150 million or more. For now, work is happening in the Rotunda, the Capitol's main feature. When you step into the Rotunda on the second floor, you'll see statues, murals, and bright golden and bronze details surrounded by ornate arches, marble, and plaster. The floor is Italian terrazzo style, with a mix of small colored tiles. There are bronze sculptures representing wisdom, courage, vision, and integrity, one in each corner of the Rotunda. The statues are placed in coves built into the walls. Above each statue is a mural of a different Roman goddess. All around are columns painted to replicate white marble, with bronze light fixtures and sculpted gold toppers, plus swirls, leaves, and flowers stretching out in 4 directions. The center of the floor is thousands of clear glass pieces set in cement. 96 feet above the floor is the peak of the Capitol's dome. Around its lower ring are a dozen painted panels featuring the South Dakota state flower, called a pasque. They all lead up to the stained glass higher in the dome. There's a crew working to restore the finer points of the Rotunda's decorative paint details. I talked to Philip Adelano. He works for the Wisconsin-based restoration firm Conrad Schmidt. Adelano is the foreman and one of 4 restoration artists on site in Pierre. Adelano's crew is giving the entire Rotunda a new paint job, not just on the walls, but also the array of molding, columns, and other ornamental elements. When I met with him, he was working on stenciling in new details near the highest point of the Rotunda. His stencils are what you'd think, patterns placed against the wall that he traces out, then fills in with paint.
These stencils will be going on some of the framing around the center of the Rotunda to emulate some of the actual ornamental plaster that's there. So it'll be kind of like a trompe-l'oeil effect, kind of fooling the eye. So from the ground, it'll essentially look like an ornamental plaster, but it'll be paint. It's kind of neat to see them from the floor, and then we'll go up top and you can see them, up there. So why don't we make our way up top? So initially when we got here several months ago, I did just a mock-up sample. Took the colors that we were going to be using and put them in the correct places. And then we used that sample to say, yes, we love it, or no, we dislike it. So everything was approved. Now we're working based off our sample that we did, and we're painting out everything, just getting everything stencil ready. We're preserving and conserving all of the original artwork and the original stencils within the Rotunda. And then we're going to be introducing some new artwork as well.
And you talked about new art. What new art is there going to be? Where's it going to be? What can we expect?
And we're going to head up. So the stencils that I showed you, those are going to be some of the things that are going to be happening. And then we also did introduce some faux or fake petrified wood on some of the columns higher up in the Rotunda that were before just painted a solid color. Couldn't really see them. So part of our paint scheme and what we're doing is highlighting the architectural elements that were lost. And now we'll be able to see them, see things separate, and just kind of see the architecture as it should be. So we're kind of at that phase now where we're just going to be decorating and polishing and fine-tuning everything. But before, I'm not sure if you saw, I'm sure you saw the Capitol before we got in here, and it was just brown, right? There was really nothing. Everything was kind of washed over. It was one color with a glaze over it. So you lost a lot of detail. So what we've done is, again, we've preserved and conserved the original artwork and highlighted the architectural elements, including some of the other things that are kind of happening. And we're allowing your architecture to separate and for people to see it kind of at its own thing, you know, so from the ground it'll be much more visible. So we actually, our studio restored this stained glass about 10 to 12 years ago, which looks great, by the way, but you couldn't really see it as much as you can now because we got rid of all of the original color it was just like a glaze, one color glazed out in the entire rotunda. Now we've painted certain areas green and brown, and it really highlights the stained glass more than it ever did before. So with the new lighting that's going to be coming in here, it's just really going to be vibrant and very inviting, very warm, very elegant looking. Again, everything's paint ready, stencil ready. We're just ready to start stenciling. You're going to see some big changes probably in the next 3 weeks, I would say, and getting a lot of the artwork on where it's ready, you know. So why don't we go up one more time? Want to climb the ladder?
Oh, jeez. I'll have you lead the way.
Okay. So you're at the very top of the rotunda here. We're about 100 feet up, a little shy of 100 feet. So everything up here we cleaned, and the plaster, this was probably some of the worst plaster damage. It was more in the center around the stained glass, which we restored. And now we're ready for stenciling. I mean, today and this week, we're really going to start jumping into a lot of that stuff. But you get a good look at the stained glass here. You can see the condition that it's in. There are no cracks. It's in really, really good shape. There's no bowing or bubbling. So while we're here doing and making all of this artwork, we're also like inspecting everything and making sure that everything's tip top and we don't see any red flags or anything like that. So, so that's where we're at.
You'd mentioned some of the like dullness, some of the kind of monochromaticness, I guess, of the lower parts of the rotunda. Were those some of your guys' like main concerns coming into this?
Yeah, well, it was so dark and dreary in here initially. For a rotunda, it didn't scream state capitol as much as it will now. You know, and I think in part of that is, you know, color, beauty, and pristineness of the space. So what we're doing now, I think, is just going to it's going to blow people's minds. I think people that were used to it before, and now they're going to see it, and I think it's going to be night and day.
Sounds like you guys are chugging along pretty quickly here.
We are, yeah. Yeah, I would say we're on schedule. If anything, maybe we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but there's still a lot of work to do, and it's on a project of this scale, it's always kind of difficult to gauge timelines sometime. I feel really good about it. Everybody on the team is great. We have a really good team here. We all work well together. Everybody knows what they're doing. Combined, we have over 100 years of experience between the four of us. So it's a privilege to be here, and it's an honor. We enjoy our job. We enjoy the buildings that we do. And, you know, walking away, we have to be proud of it. You know, we don't want to put our name on something that we're just not happy with. So we're excited. We're excited for this project.
Was there anything, as you were kind of going through the history of it, that made it stand out to you? Anything that made this Capitol unique from other buildings you've worked on?
Yeah, so just in talking with some of the people that have worked here, I had heard some of the history and some of the artwork in the state capitol that was done in, I want to say, 1985 by inmates, which says a lot to me as far as the quality. We were kind of wondering, like kind of what happened, because it seemed from our perspective, as someone who does restoration and conservation professionally, and then seeing the artwork in other places of the state capitol, it was almost like it was outlined in Sharpie, which is in fact what happened. So to hear that story just kind of validated some of our concerns and some of our interests, but it also makes us excited to bring it back to the way it should be. And I did find, a signature on one of the capitals down there from 1985, which must have been from an inmate who was working in the rotunda at the time. So we love stuff like that. We love little finds like that, just the history, the details, old newspapers, old pennies, things you never would suspect are there that we find.
How do you reconcile that 1985 job with the original job that was done here, and how are you kind of bringing those two together?
So we can really tell, like I said, the artwork in the rotunda was painted in 85, I would assume, but the artwork wasn't really touched. It was just the architecture itself. So you can see the distinct difference between the original artwork and the stuff that was done in 1985. So we're pushing more towards the original as opposed to the 1985 look. We have had to match some of the artwork from the 85 campaign, just because the Capitol isn't quite ready for that big push to bring it to that level of Conrad Schmidt's level quite yet. So we're balancing, we're bringing some back up to 1985, and then we're trying to, for the rotunda, which is why we're here, this will be, the crown jewel. It'll be tip top. So
And I have to ask, we're 100 feet up. Are you afraid of heights? Were you afraid of heights when you took this job?
I am not afraid of heights. I've always been kind of a daredevil kid, and I really don't think about it. I feel the ground and the scaffolding is safe below my feet, which makes me comfortable to be on it. If it was shaky and rocky and a little uneven, I'd probably be a little bit more petrified. But I feel good. That's part of my job, is to make sure that we're able to do our job safely and effectively. So I do walk the scaffolding and make sure that there aren't any hazards, things for people to hit their head on. But it's part of the thrill for me. So,
What's it like kind of handling all of this history too?
so I've been doing this job for with Conrad Schmidt for about 12 years, and I've been doing this job for about 22 years. So before, I used to get really nervous and think about all these things. I've been doing it so long that it's second nature. I think about them, yes, but it's in a different way. It's a humbling experience. It's almost like we're the next phase of history. So I look at it in a different light than having this deal of responsibility. I look at it like we're here because we should be here. We're the best at what we do, and we're just that next phase of history. So to me, I think it just comes with age. Getting older, so I feel like, I just don't think about those things as much. I just know we're going to do a great job, and I look forward to the finished product. So.
On the climb down, I met with painter Alyssa Johnson. She's been working on the capitals of the columns around the third floor.
Right now, we're doing the capitals, which is the ornate piece that you'll find at the tops of columns. This is going to be a 4-part process. We have a base coat, and then we're putting a gold coat over that, and then there's going to be a stain, and then the very last is going to be gold leaf on the tips, just for a little extra pizzazz and sparkle.
And what other pieces have you really been working on since you've been here?
I came in a little bit later, so I've done a lot of these archways. They're called dentals. These little knots. Because they're like teeth. So up on a higher level is filling in the space between those. It's been a lot of getting into weird, awkward positions to get at weird, awkward angles.
Is that something that you're used to with a restoration like this?
Yeah. This is my first time actually doing one that's not a Catholic church. I guess they have, they're mostly Catholic. We do theaters and like historic buildings and stuff, but this is my personal first time doing something that's not a church, so that's kind of a fun change for me. But I mean, the general architecture and it's the same general design principles. You've got stained glass, you've got mural work, you've got arches, you've got molding, you've got capitals, columns. It's a lot of the same kind of design elements that we're working on. I've been an artist my whole life. I've been with this company for three and a half years, and I got picked up out of it. I went to an atelier school, which is like classical realist fine art, and like the people that do our mural work and like these would be examples of that. I'm mostly doing this kind of decorative stuff, but I do also occasionally dip into my like really more professional training, which is mural work and like fine art painting.
What's it like handling all of this history and all of these kind of unique little aspects?
It's been a really interesting learning curve. Like I said, I've been an artist my whole life, but I was mostly working with oil paints, watercolors, more fine art media. And so shifting into like different types of paints, but also just different types of considerations you have to think about when you're working on a building, and that there's just like a several year long plan now. We're going to come back. We're going to be doing stuff in both the House and Senate floors. I think eventually we're also going to be redoing all the detailing work that was done by prisoners in the 80s, because it's done with Sharpie. And
What was it like? I mean, you're someone who's very well versed in the fine art side of stuff to come in and see some of this.
Wrong with Sharpie. I just wouldn't put it on a state capitol building. It seems a little bit irreverent, but it's obviously held up well because that it's as old as I am. Like that work was done about the same time I was born, so it's held up. But I can understand wanting to zhuzh it up a little bit with a little bit more professional materials than Sharpie.
I mean, what do you think is most interesting about this job, or what really speaks to you about it?
I think one of the coolest things to me is that besides the materials have updated, with the invention of polymers and latex paints, acrylic paints, latex paints, basically all the ones made out of dino juice, petroleum products. Those are pretty new in terms of the whole history of art and fine art and painting and, interior decoration and stuff. But other than that, like the techniques haven't really changed. We're doing the same stuff that was done hundreds of years ago, which that's what the schooling I did was. It was also just purely traditional technique, all from life, only oil, charcoal, and pencil. So this is like taking that kind of tradition and like feeling like I'm part of this like longer flow of art. And besides the updated materials, it's just like it's being part of that tradition. And now getting to work in these kinds of buildings, I'm just further expanding upon the ways that I am a part of that tradition. Oh, and I did find some initials over on top of that one. That's kind of another tradition, is people either leaving little Easter eggs or initials or drawings, but in a spot where only another worker will ever see it. There's nowhere in this building you'd be able to see it unless you're standing on scaffolding looking right at it, like we are.
I mean, you kind of mentioned just how many layers of paint have been put on these capitals. That's part of history too.
Totally. I mean, that happens even on small scales. Like I'll paint over a painting and then you look at it from the back and you can actually see the original painting kind of if you hold it up to light. Here it's more, it builds up in like actual layers and you can see, it's fun. There's definitely a lot of stories, I feel like, that just in this building and in the art and architecture of it. Not even beyond like the history of governing, but actually just in the building itself. It feels like there's just a lot of stories that are fascinating.
I mean, yeah, you kind of walk around and you notice little details here and there, and
we don't make them like they used to. There's not a whole lot of new architecture that lives up to this level of like craftsmanship and detail. And
as work finishes up top, the scaffolding will be dismantled from the top down. The funding for the plaster repairs and this portion of the project used $3 million of state funding from last year. Earlier this year, lawmakers used $1.1 million to start a capital restoration fund, which will continue to grow and be used for future restoration projects. That's all we have for this episode of Searchlight Report. Audio for this episode of the podcast came from recordings by South Dakota Searchlight. The podcast is based on reporting by South Dakota Searchlight's staff, editor Seth Tupper, senior reporter John Holt, and reporters Joshua Heyer, Mackenzie Huber, and me. I write the scripts and produce the audio with editing by Seth Tupper. South Dakota Searchlight is part of States Newsroom, the nation's largest nonprofit news organization. Until next time, I'm South Dakota Searchlight's Megan O'Brien with the Searchlight Report.